The photograph was found in the attic, tucked between the old family ledgers and a dusty box of my great-grandmother's letters. It showed a woman with my great-grandmother's face, standing in a house that looked exactly like the one I live in today. The date on the back was 1920. My great-grandmother died when I was 5, and the family story said she was hit by a car on the road that ran through the town. But this house? It was built in 1920 by her family to hide the truth about her death. The house wasn't just a house, it was a living memory. I couldn't sleep that night. I went to the house and saw the window. It was the same window as in the photo. I stood in front of the house, the same house I lived in for the past 30 years. The air felt heavy, as if the house were breathing. I touched the window and felt a shiver. It was the same window as in the photo. My great-grandmother died in a car accident in 1920, but the family story said she was hit by a drunk driver. Yet the house was built that same year. Why would they build a house in the year of her death? I walked inside and the smell of old paper and dust filled my nostrils. It was like the house was breathing. The house wasn't just a house, it was a living memory. I went to the family archive and found the ledger. The house was built in 1920 by my great-grandmother's family. But the family story said she died in 1920. The house was built to contain her memory. The ledger also showed that my great-grandmother was part of a secret society that had been trying to protect the family from a curse. The curse? It was the memory of her death. If the memory was released, the family would be destroyed. But the house was built in 1920 to hide the memory. I realized the house was the only place where the memory could be kept safe. I met with my uncle, who had been the last to know the family secrets. He told me that my great-grandmother was part of a secret society that had been trying to protect the family from a curse. The curse was the memory of her death. If the memory was released, the family would be destroyed. The house was built in 1920 to contain the memory. The ritual was simple. When the memory was strong, the house would take the memory and hide it. But my great-grandmother died in 1920, so the house was built that year. The ritual was to be repeated every generation to keep the memory alive. But the house was built in 1920, so the ritual started that year. I walked through the house and felt it breathing. The air was thick with memory. I saw my great-grandmother in the window, standing in the same place as in the photo. She looked at me with a sadness I couldn't describe. Then she disappeared. I realized the house was alive. It was remembering her death. The memory was strong. I felt it in my chest. My great-grandmother was not dead. She was trapped in the house. The house was holding her memory. I needed to find a way to free her. The memory grew stronger. I could feel her presence in the house. I saw her standing in the garden where she died. She was crying. The house was protecting her. But the house was also trapping her. I realized the house was the memory itself. It was built to contain her death. The memory was her death. The house was built to hold that memory. I saw her in the window again. She was holding a key to freedom. But the house would not let her go. I went to the garden where she died. The grass was overgrown. I found the key. It was old and had a distinct pattern. I put it in my pocket. But the house was watching me. It was holding me. I realized the house was alive. It was the memory of her death. The key was a way to free her. But the house would not let her go. The memory was too strong. I felt it in my chest. The house was remembering her death. I had to break the cycle. I stood at the edge of the garden, the key in my hand. The house was breathing. I could feel it in my chest. My great-grandmother was trapped. The house was holding her memory. I had to break the cycle. I placed the key in the window. The house reacted. It shivered. The memory was strong. I felt it in my chest. I knew what I had to do. I had to let go. I let go of the key. The house shuddered. The memory began to fade. I felt it in my chest. The house was breathing. But the memory was strong. It was my great-grandmother's death. I felt it in my chest. I knew I had to let go. I placed my hand on the window. I felt the memory. It was fading. The house was emptying. My great-grandmother was free. I walked into the house. The memory was fading. The house was empty. The air was light. I saw my great-grandmother in the garden. She was smiling. She was free. The house was emptying. I realized the house was not a house. It was the memory itself. The memory had been released. The house was empty. I had broken the cycle. I stood in the garden. My great-grandmother was smiling. She was free. The house was empty. I realized the house was not a house. It was the memory itself. The memory had been released. The house was empty. I had broken the cycle. But the memory was not gone. It was a new memory. A memory of freedom. I felt it in my chest. It was strong. It was mine. I had to protect it. I realized the house was not just a house. It was a living memory. It was the memory of my great-grandmother's death. But it had been released. It was now a memory of freedom. The house was alive. It was breathing. I felt it in my chest. The memory was strong. It was mine. I had to protect it. The house was the memory itself. It was alive. It was remembering me. I stood at the edge of the garden. The house was breathing. The memory was strong. I knew what I had to do. I had to protect it. I placed my hand on the window. I felt the memory. It was alive. It was mine. I had broken the cycle. But the house was not gone. It was still alive. It was the memory of freedom. I had to protect it. The house was the memory itself. It was breathing. I closed my eyes. I felt the house breathing. I felt the memory. It was strong. It was mine. It was freedom. The house was my memory. It was alive. It was breathing. I had broken the cycle. The house was not gone. It was now a living memory. It was the memory of freedom. I was free. I was alive. The house was my memory. It was breathing.